Princess Nyera sat in the grand balcony of her palace, staring out at the vast starry sky. The lights of the distant planets twinkled, but they did nothing to warm her heart. She was alone, even though she was surrounded by the luxury of her royal life. As the daughter of the powerful Emperor Chorus, the ruler of the Ziran Empire, Nyera was meant to be adored. Yet no matter how many people surrounded her, she always felt empty inside. Her people respected her, but they didn't love her. She had long ago learned that love was something she would never experience. The weight of her royal responsibilities left little room for feelings. Her father, Emperor Chorus, often reminded her that she was the future of the empire, a symbol of power and strength. He rarely showed affection, focusing instead on keeping her strong for the empire's sake. But Nyera didn't feel strong. She felt lonely. Her heart yearned for something more than duty and politics. She wanted to feel truly loved for who she was, not for her title or her role. The pressure to be perfect was suffocating, and it had made her build walls around her heart. She told herself that no one could ever truly care for her, not the way she wanted. She would always be a princess first, and a person second. Nyera's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. She turned to see her trusted advisor, General Varric, entering the room. He was tall and strong, with a sharp gaze that never missed a detail. He had been with her since she was a child, and though he was loyal to her, Nyera could never shake the feeling that he saw her only as a symbol of her royal family. She had always wondered if anyone could truly see her for who she was behind the crown. "My princess," Varric said, bowing slightly. "There's news from the human delegation. They've arrived on Ziran for the peace talks." The humans had been a strange presence in her empire. Despite their small size and limited technology, they had proven themselves to be formidable allies. They had helped the Xian Empire in many ways, but there was always something about them that Nyera found intriguing. Especially one human in particular, Captain Ethan Keller. He was different from the others. He was quiet yet strong. He didn't seem to care about the titles or the politics that so many others around her obsessed over. He simply did his job, and seemed to find peace in it. Nyera had seen him a few times during the peace negotiations, but they had never really spoken. She often wondered what he thought of her, if he saw her the way others did, as just another royal figure. She didn't want to admit it, but part of her hoped he saw something more, something real. But she quickly pushed that thought aside. It was foolish to think someone like him could ever care for someone like her. "Shall I prepare your speech for the delegation, my princess?" Varric asked, breaking her from her thoughts. Nyera sighed, running a hand through her long silver hair. "Yes, General. Prepare it. But I want to meet with Captain Keller first." Varric raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Are you sure, my princess?" "He is just a human, after all." Nyera's gaze softened. "That may be, but he is still part of this alliance. I want to see him. I want to speak with him." Varric hesitated, but then nodded. "As you wish, princess." The meeting with Captain Keller was set for the following day. Nyera spent the rest of the night preparing herself. She was determined to make a good impression, but deep inside, she couldn't ignore the unease growing in her chest. She had spent so many years hiding behind her title, hiding behind her royal duties. Now, with the human captain, she felt vulnerable. She felt like she might be seen, not as a princess, but as a person. When the time finally came, Nyera entered the grand hall where the meeting was to take place. She was dressed in the finest robes, the silver embroidery catching the light of the sun as it filtered through the windows. She kept her head high, as was expected of her, but inside her heart raced. She could feel her palms begin to sweat. She quickly wiped them on her robes. Captain Keller was already waiting for her. Standing by a large window that overlooked the gardens, he was tall, with short brown hair, and a calm demeanor that contrasted sharply with the usual chaos of royal meetings. When he turned to face her, there was no awe in his eyes, no nervousness. He simply smiled, and it was that smile that caught Nyera off guard. "Princess Nyera," he said, his voice steady and warm. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you." Nyera's heart fluttered, but she quickly regained her composure. "The pleasure is mine, Captain Keller," she replied, I've heard much about your people. Ethan nodded. I've heard a lot about you too, Princess. Your father is a powerful leader. Nyera smiled politely, but her mind wandered. She had heard the same words from countless others. It was always about her father, her family, and the empire. It was never about her, the person. It's never about Nyera, the lonely princess. Shall we begin? She asked, trying to focus on the matter at hand as the conversation turned to matters of diplomacy and peace. Nyera found herself strangely at ease. Ethan didn't treat her like a princess. He didn't act as though she had to live up to some impossible standard. He spoke to her like a human, like someone who could understand. Her struggles? It was a small thing, but it was enough to make her feel something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. For the first time in a long time, Kira allowed herself to think that maybe, just maybe, she could find someone who would see her for who she truly was, and not just for her crown. This part sets the tone for Nyera's loneliness. Her struggle with her royal duties and her growing curiosity about Ethan. It leads up to their first meeting, setting the stage for the rest of the story. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments. The next day, Nyera stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the royal robes her father insisted she wear for every occasion. She looked at her reflection, her silver hair cascaded down her back and her eyes. The color of the moonlit sky seemed colder than she felt inside. Her face showed little emotion, a mask she wore to maintain the dignity expected of her as a princess. But inside, there was a small nagging feeling that she couldn't shake. It was the feeling that maybe, just maybe, something could change. Today was the day she would speak with Captain Ethan Keller again. The thought of it made her both nervous and curious. She had never felt this way before. But what made her more uncertain was the kindness he had shown her during their first meeting. It wasn't like anything she had ever experienced. Everyone around her was either distant or kind only because they had to be. But with Ethan, there was something genuine, something she couldn't quite understand, Your Highness. Varric's voice interrupted her thoughts. The general had entered the room with his usual stern expression. Captain Keller is ready for your meeting. Nyera nodded and took a deep breath. It wasn't that she was afraid of the meeting. It was just that she didn't know how to act. Around someone like Ethan, he was different from the other humans she had met. He didn't care about her title, and that both frightened and fascinated her. When she entered the meeting room, she was greeted by Ethan's calm and welcoming demeanor. He stood by the large table wearing a simple uniform that contrasted with the extravagance of her royal attire. His eyes met hers, and for a moment there was an unspoken understanding between them. It was as if he saw her not as a princess, but as a person. Princess Nyera, he greeted her, his voice warm and sincere. It's good to see you again. She nodded, her heart racing slightly. It's good to see you too, Captain. They sat across from each other at the table, and as the meeting began, Nyera found herself listening more intently than usual. Ethan's words were clear and thoughtful, and there was no hint of condescension in his tone. He didn't speak to her as though she were royalty, but as though she were an equal. This was a feeling she had longed for, but never thought she would experience. To be seen for who she truly was, not just for her status. As the conversation turned to the peace talks and the shared goals of their two civilizations, Nyera couldn't help but notice how comfortable she felt in Ethan's presence. There was no tension, no awkwardness, just a genuine connection. When she spoke, he listened, truly listened. And when he spoke, she found herself hanging on every word, not because of his position, but because there was a kindness in him that made her feel like she mattered. It was a small thing, but it was enough to make her heart flutter in a way she hadn't experienced before. For the first time in a long time, Nyera didn't feel like a ruler. She felt like a person, someone who could be understood, someone who could belong. As the meeting came to an end, Nyera stood up, surprised at how quickly the time had passed. She had expected the conversation to be formal and stiff, but instead, it had felt like talking to an old friend. She looked at Ethan, who was still sitting at the table, his calm expression never wavering. I appreciate your time, Captain Keller, she said softly, her voice slightly hesitant. Ethan stood up and smiled at her. "The pleasure was mine, Princess. I'm glad we could have this conversation." Niera nodded, her heart beating a little. Faster than usual? She didn't want to leave just yet, but she knew she had to. There were duties to attend to, meetings with her father, and the expectations of her people to meet. But for a brief moment, she wished she could stay and talk to him more. It felt natural, like she was talking to someone who truly understood her. As she turned to leave, Ethan spoke again. "Princess, before you go," Niera paused and looked back at him. He hesitated for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. "Just want to say," he began, his voice steady, "that you're not alone. You may feel like it sometimes, but you're not." Niera's heart skipped a beat. No one had ever said anything like that to her. Her father, her advisors, even her people, all of them, had expected her to be strong, to be the leader they needed. But no one had ever reminded her that it was okay to feel alone, and more importantly, that she didn't have to stay alone. She didn't know how to respond at first. The words were simple, but they meant more to her than anything she had ever heard. She didn't need a crown or a title to be worthy of kindness. She just needed someone who could see her for who she really was. "Thank you, Captain," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded, and Niera turned to leave, her mind racing. As she walked down the hallway toward her chambers, she couldn't help but feel a warmth spreading through her chest. It wasn't just the warmth of the sun filtering through the windows. It was something deeper, something she had never allowed herself to feel before. Hope? She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. There was someone out there who would see her for who she truly was, and not just as the Princess of Zurn, and for the first time, Niera began to think that perhaps she was lovable after. Niera sat at the edge of her throne room, staring out at the vast expanse of stars beyond her palace. The endless sky seemed to stretch on forever, just like the responsibilities that weighed on her shoulders. She was the Princess of Zeren, the heir to a powerful empire, and yet she felt small. It had been days since her meeting with Captain Ethan Keller, but the memory of his kind words lingered in her mind. Like a light she couldn't quite ignore, she had spent most of her life hiding, behind her royal duties, never allowing herself to feel too much, never letting anyone in. But after that conversation with Ethan, she realized how much she had been missing. He had seen her as something more than a symbol of power. He had seen her as a person. Niera knew she had to push those feelings aside. She had a duty to her people, a duty that came before everything else. But the more she tried to focus on her royal duties, the more Ethan's words echoed in her mind. "You're not alone," he had said. Those simple words had opened something inside her, something she wasn't sure how to handle. As much as Niera wanted to dismiss the feelings growing inside her, she couldn't. She was curious about Ethan. More than she had ever been about anyone. She wanted to understand him better, to know what made him so different from the other people she had encountered in her life. He wasn't like the other humans. He didn't care about her title, her family, or the power she represented. He saw her as she was, and that was something Niera wasn't used to. "Your Highness?" Varric's voice broke through her thoughts. The general had entered the room, his expression unreadable as always. "There's a communication from Captain Keller. He requests a private meeting." Niera's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected Ethan to reach out again so soon. She had tried to keep their interaction professional. But now, with this sudden request, she wondered if he was thinking about her the same way she was thinking about him. "Arrange the meeting," Niera said, her voice steady, despite the rush of emotions running through her. "I will see him." A few hours later, Niera found herself in the grand meeting hall, waiting for Ethan's arrival. The hall was silent, save for the soft hum of the air filtration system. Niera could hear her heartbeat in her ears as she tried to calm herself. This was just another meeting, just another part of her duties. But this time, it felt different. She wasn't sure why, but it did. When Ethan entered, he gave her a small smile, one that seemed to put her at ease. He wasn't dressed in his usual military uniform. Today, he wore a simple shirt and pants, more relaxed than she had seen him. Before, it was strange, yet comforting. He seemed so human in that moment. It's not like the powerful figures she was used to dealing with. Princess Niera. Ethan greeted her with a soft tone, as if they were old friends rather than allies meeting for a formal discussion. Captain. Keller Niera replied, standing to greet him. Thank you for meeting with me. Ethan nodded, his expression sincere. The pleasure is mine, Princess. I wanted to check on you after our last meeting. You seemed different. Niera didn't know how to respond. She had been different, hadn't she? She had felt something that she hadn't felt in years, hope. But she couldn't let that show. Not here. Not now. She had to stay focused on the mission, on the peace talks. Her people depended on her. I've been thinking about our conversation, Niera admitted, her voice softer than usual. I've realized that I haven't been honest with myself. Ethan raised an eyebrow. His curiosity piqued. Honest with yourself? Niera hesitated, unsure of how to continue. She wasn't used to talking like this, especially not with someone from another world. But something about Ethan made her want to open up, to share the feelings she had buried for so long. For most of my life, I've hidden behind my royal duties, she began, looking down at her hands. I've always been told that I must be strong, that I must live up to the expectations of my people, but I've never allowed myself to feel like I am enough, like I am loved for who I am. Ethan's expression softened, and he took a step closer to her. You are enough, Princess, he said quietly. You're more than enough. You don't have to carry the weight of the galaxy on your shoulders alone. Niera looked up at him, meeting his gaze for the first time without any walls between them. There was something in his eyes, something real, something she had never seen in the eyes of the people around her. Compassion, understanding, acceptance. I don't know how to be anything but what I've been trained to be, Niera said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I want to try. I want to know what it's like to be ... seen, not as a princess, but as Niera, the person. Ethan took a deep breath, his words carefully chosen. I think you already know what it's like. You've been seen for who you are, more than you. Think maybe you just need to believe it yourself. Niera felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in years, she felt like someone truly understood her. And not just as a ruler, but as a person. It was a feeling she had longed for, but never thought she would find. I've spent so long thinking I was unlovable, Niera said, her voice trembling slightly. But you've shown me that maybe I'm wrong. Ethan smiled, his eyes filled with kindness. You're not unlovable, Niera. You're one of the most incredible people I've ever met. Niera's heart fluttered in her chest. She'd always told herself that no one could love her, that her duties would always come first. But for the first time, she realized that there was more to life than her crown and her title. There was a chance for something real, something beautiful. As their conversation continued, Niera found herself opening up more than she ever had before. She shared her dreams, her fears, and the weight of her responsibilities. Ethan listened, never interrupting, never judging. For once she didn't have to hide behind her role as a princess. She could simply be herself. By the end of the meeting, Niera felt lighter. It was as though a burden had been lifted from her shoulders. She no longer felt alone, no longer felt like she was unworthy of love. And it was all because of one human, one person who had seen her for who she truly was. As they said their goodbyes, Niera couldn't help but smile. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she had found a friend, someone who would accept her no matter what. And maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something. The tension on Zern was growing. Niera could feel it in the air. Something was wrong, but she couldn't put her finger on it. Her people were nervous, their whispers too loud to ignore. For the first time, she wasn't just worried about politics and the peace talks. She was worried for her people, for her home, and for herself. The warships had arrived quietly at first, but now they were everywhere. The galaxy was shifting, and Zirin stood at the center of it. Her father, Emperor Chorus, had always been calm in the face of danger. But Niera could see the weight of the coming storm in his eyes. She had never seen him look so uncertain before. Princess Niera. We need you in the council chambers, General Varric said as he entered her private chambers. His tone was serious, his face unreadable as always. "Of course, General Niera," replied, standing up quickly. She knew the moment had arrived. Whatever was happening, it was about to unfold. She had always known that her duty to her people would one day come before her own feelings, but this was different. She felt the pull of something more than just her responsibility as a princess. She followed Varric through the palace corridors, her mind racing with questions. What had triggered this sudden tension? Why had the warships arrived so suddenly? And what did it mean for the future of Zurin? As she entered the council chambers, the room fell silent. All eyes were on her, the weight of the galaxy's uncertainty pressing down on everyone. Her father sat at the head of the table, looking even more imposing than usual, his face tight with stress. "My princess," Emperor Chorus said, his voice deep and commanding. "We are facing an unprecedented crisis. The warships have been deployed, and the Empire is on the verge of an open conflict. The Council believes we need to act quickly to avoid further escalation." Niera looked around the room, seeing the faces of the advisors and military leaders she had known her whole life, but she didn't feel the usual confidence that came with being surrounded by these figures of authority. She felt like an outsider, as though she didn't belong in this space. It wasn't just the pressure of the situation. It was the realization that something inside her had changed. She wasn't the same cold, distant princess she had once been. She felt something more, something she couldn't ignore. "Father," Niera said, her voice steady, but with an edge of worry. "What are we going to do? The people are scared. We can't just stand by and watch as the galaxy falls into chaos." Father looked at her for a long moment, as if weighing her words. "You are right, Niera, but we cannot act in haste. Must maintain control, no matter the cost." The room buzzed with murmurs, but Niera felt something stir within her. Was the heir to the throne the future of the Zurin Empire? But what did that really mean? Her whole life she had been groomed for power, but now she wasn't sure what kind of ruler she wanted to be. She didn't want to rule through fear, through strength alone. She wanted to rule with compassion, with understanding. Could she do that in a time like this? General Niera said, turning to Varric, who stood by the council table. "What do the warships want? Why have they come here?" Varric's gaze was intense. "They are from the alliance of Soren, princess. Believe Zurin is on the brink of a rebellion. They want us to swear allegiance to them, or they will use force to bring us into their fold. The warships are their way of ensuring we comply." Niera's stomach twisted with the weight of his words. This wasn't just about politics or alliances. It was about survival. The Soren alliance was a powerful group, and they wouldn't hesitate to crush anyone who opposed them. Her mind raced. She knew the path her father would take. He would fight. Zeron's strength was its military might, and he would defend it at all costs. But what if that wasn't the right path? What if there was another way to end this conflict before it even began? A thought crossed her mind. Ethan. Captain Ethan Keller. It's the human who had shown her kindness, who had made her feel seen in a way no one else had. Could he help? Could he be the key to ending this peacefully? Niera couldn't ignore the growing connection she felt to him. It was more than just gratitude for his kindness. It was something deeper, something she didn't fully understand. But maybe, just maybe, he could help her find a way out of this crisis. "Father," Niera said, her voice firm but respectful. "I believe there is another way. I want to speak to Captain Keller. I believe he can help us avoid this war." Her father's eyes narrowed, and the room fell silent. "You want to speak to a human, Captain? It's not the time for diplomacy, Niera. We need action, not discussions." But Niera stood her ground. "Please, Father. This isn't about our strength. It's about our future. If we fight, we may destroy everything we've worked for. But if we listen to what Captain Keller has to offer, we may find a peaceful solution." The Emperor's gaze softened, but only slightly. He was a ruler, and his duty was to protect the Empire. But Niera had learned over the years that her father wasn't inflexible. He cared deeply for his people. And if anyone could convince him to take a different approach, it would be her. "Very well," her father said, his voice heavy. "But you must be cautious. The humans may not understand the gravity of the situation. Niera nodded, relieved that her father had given his approval. She turned to Varric, her determination growing. Prepare for the meeting. I will speak to Captain Keller. As Niera left the council chambers, her thoughts were already on Ethan. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't face it alone. And with Ethan's help, maybe, just maybe, they could prevent a war that could destroy everything. This part delves into the growing crisis on Zarin and how Niera is beginning to find her own voice in her role as a leader. It also highlights her belief in a peaceful solution, which leads her to turn to Ethan for help. Let me know if you need any changes or adjustments. The meeting had been set. Niera stood in the small chamber where she had often retreated to think in peace, but today it felt different. Her hands were clenched, not from anger, but from the anxiety she had tried so hard to ignore. She was about to ask Captain Ethan Keller, the human who had shown her more kindness than anyone ever had, to help her solve the greatest challenge she had ever faced. She glanced at the mirror in the corner of the room. Her reflection was still that of the princess, her royal robes flowing elegantly, her silver hair shining under the light. But her eyes, those soft moonlit eyes, revealed more than just the leader of the Zarin Empire. They showed a woman caught. Between her duty and her heart, the crisis was reaching its peak. The Sorin Alliance's fleet had drawn closer, their ships hovering near Ziron's borders. The council had been clear in their message. Ziron would either submit to their demands or face the consequences. Emperor Chorus was determined to fight, to defend their empire with every ounce of strength they had. Niera could feel her father's resolve, but she also knew that his way of fighting might lead them all into destruction. What if there was another way? Her thoughts returned to Ethan, the human who had looked at her not as a princess, but as a person. He had spoken to her as if she mattered, as if she were more than just a figurehead. In the midst of all the pressure, his words had planted a seed of hope, a hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. What if he could help her find a peaceful solution? He had experience with conflict, but he also understood the value of diplomacy. Neuer felt the weight of her decision. She had always been told that a ruler must be strong, must not let emotions cloud their judgment. But this time, she knew her heart was telling her something different. She had to try. She couldn't just follow her father's path without question. Not when there was a chance to avoid war. The door to the chamber opened, and in walked General Varric, followed by Ethan. The human's presence was a calm contrast to the tension that filled the room. His expression was unreadable, but Niera could sense the same determination in him that she had seen in her father. She wasn't sure what to expect from Ethan, but she had asked for this moment. She had asked for his help. Princess Ethan greeted her, his voice steady but gentle. "I hope I'm not intruding." Niera smiled softly, trying to hide her nervousness. "Not at all, Captain. I'm glad you could come." Ethan nodded, his calm demeanor never faltering. "You've made a difficult decision, Princess. The situation is ... complicated, but I believe there's always a way to solve things without violence." Niera's heart lifted slightly at his words. Ethan wasn't here to tell her what to do. He was here to help, just as he always had been. She had made the right choice in trusting him. Now she had to believe in herself as much as he believed. "In her I've been thinking about your words, Captain," Niera began, trying to steady her breath. "You said that there was always a way. But my people, they're terrified. They want protection and they want peace. But peace comes at a cost, and I'm not sure if I'm ready to pay it." Ethan stepped closer, his eyes focused on her. "It's not about paying a price, Princess. It's about finding the right balance. Yes, your people are scared, but they need to know that there's more than one way to protect them. You don't have to choose between your people and your beliefs. You can have both." Niera looked at him, the weight of his words sinking in. Could it really be that simple? Could there really be a way to protect her people without sacrificing everything? Her mind was clouded with doubt, but Ethan's steady gaze made her feel like there was a path she could follow. Maybe she had spent too long thinking she could only follow the path of war, the path her father had chosen. But could she build something new? Something that honored her beliefs and her responsibility as a ruler? "I don't know how to convince my father," Niera said, her voice quiet. He's always believed that power and force are the only things that can protect us. Ethan's expression softened. I don't think it's about convincing him. It's about showing him that there's another way to protect your people without fighting. Naira nodded slowly. She knew that Ethan was right. Her father had always been the protector, the warrior. But perhaps it was time for a new kind of strength, one that came from understanding and unity. If she could convince her father that peace was possible, maybe they could avoid the destruction that seemed inevitable. She turned to Varric, who had been standing quietly by the door, observing the conversation. General, I need your help. I want to speak to my father, but I need to show him that there is another way. We need to bring all sides to the table. Varric looked at her with a mixture of surprise and respect. You are asking for something difficult, Princess. But if you believe it's possible, then I will support you. Naira's heart raced. It wasn't just about her now. It was about the future of Zien, about her people, and about the path she would take as a leader. She couldn't let fear guide her decisions anymore. She had to be the ruler her people needed, one who understood the importance of compassion. As much as strength? Thank you, General, Naira said, her voice firm. We can do this. We can bring peace to Zirin. Ethan stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. You're not alone in this, Princess. We'll find a way together. Looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had never expected to find someone like him, someone who would stand by her side, someone who saw her not as a princess, but as a person. For the first time in her life, Naira felt like she could lead not just with power, but with heart. And with Ethan's help, maybe, just maybe, they could show the galaxy that peace was worth fighting for. Naira stood in front of the grand doors of the council chambers, her heart racing. She had spent her entire life preparing for moments like this, moments of power, moments where decisions were made that would affect the future of her people. But this time, it was different. This time, she wasn't just going to follow in her father's footsteps. She was going to take control of her destiny, and with the support of Captain Ethan Keller, she believed she could do it. Her father had agreed to this meeting, though he had not been happy about it. He had always relied on military strength to solve problems, but Naira could sense that he was beginning to see the cracks in that approach. She had made him listen, made him consider the possibility of peace. It wasn't going to be easy, but Naira was ready to fight for it. As the doors opened, she stepped into the council chambers. The room was large, filled with the most important advisors and military leaders of the Zirin Empire. They all stood as she entered, bowing respectfully. But Naira couldn't shake the feeling that they were waiting for her to fail. They didn't believe in peace. They didn't believe that diplomacy could work. But she was determined to prove them wrong. At the head of the table sat her father, Emperor Chorus. His stern expression never changed as he looked at her, but Naira knew him better than anyone. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the uncertainty that he rarely showed. He didn't want to lose the respect of his people, and he certainly didn't want to appear weak. But Naira wasn't asking him to give up his strength. She was asking him to show a different kind of strength. A strength that came from understanding, from choosing the path of peace rather than war. Father, Naira said, her voice steady. I've asked for this meeting because I believe there's a way out of this crisis. I've spoken to Captain Keller, and he has shown me that we don't have to fight to protect our people. We can find another way. The room fell silent. Her father's gaze hardened, but Naira wasn't afraid. She had made up her mind. She was no longer the uncertain princess who had hidden behind her crown. You're ready to lead. You're asking me to trust a human, Naira? Her father finally spoke, his voice rough with disbelief. A human who is part of a race we know little about? What makes you think he understands the stakes of this conflict? Naira stepped forward, meeting her father's gaze with all the conviction she could muster. Captain Keller may not be from Zirin, but he understands what it means to fight. For peace. He has shown me that there's always a choice, always a way to avoid bloodshed. And I believe that we can avoid this war, if we choose to. The room was still, the tension thick in the air. Naira knew it wasn't going to be easy to change her father's mind. He was a warrior, a man who had built his entire life around the strength of his empire. But this time it wasn't just about strength. It was about the future, about the kind of legacy they wanted to leave behind. Her father's gaze softened just a little. He turned to look at the others in the room. They were all waiting for his decision, but Niera could see the doubt in their eyes. She could feel their uncertainty, their fear. They had lived their lives in the shadow of war, and they didn't know how to act when faced with the possibility of peace. "You all know the power of the Sorin Alliance," her father finally said, his voice quieter now. "But we cannot bend to their will. We cannot let them believe that Zarin is weak." "We are not weak," Niera replied firmly. "We are strong enough to choose peace, strong enough to show the galaxy that there is a way forward without bloodshed. We don't have to prove our strength through war. We can prove it by standing firm in our beliefs." Her father's gaze lingered on her for a long moment. Then, without saying a word, he turned to the council members. They exchanged looks, unsure of how to respond. The weight of the decision was heavy on all of them. But finally, one by one, they nodded, their faces showing the first signs of agreement. "Very well," her father said, his voice steady. "We will speak with the Sorin Alliance, but I will not guarantee that they will listen to us. I will not promise that they will accept our terms." "I'm not asking for a guarantee, Father," Niera replied, her voice soft but confident. "A chance to show them that there is another way, a chance to prove that Zarin can lead with wisdom, not just power." The council murmured among themselves, but Niera could feel the shift. It wasn't much, but it was enough. She had convinced her father, and now they were going to do something that had never been done before. They were going to try peace. "I will make the arrangements, Varric," the general said. "We will contact the Sorin Alliance and request a meeting. But be prepared, Princess. They may not accept your offer." Niera nodded, her resolve stronger than ever. "I know, but we have to try." As the council meeting came to an end, Niera felt a sense of calm she hadn't felt in weeks. It wasn't over yet. There was still so much to do, so much to negotiate. But for the first time, she felt like they were moving in the right direction. As she left the council chambers, Ethan was waiting for her outside. His presence, calm and steady as always, made her feel like everything was going to be okay. She smiled when she saw him, and for a moment, the weight of the galaxy lifted from her shoulders. "We did it," Niera said, her voice filled with hope. "We convinced them to try." Ethan smiled, his eyes filled with pride. "You did it, Princess. You showed them that there's always a way, even when it seems impossible." Niera felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was no longer just a princess. She was a leader, someone who had the power to change the world, someone who could choose peace. Together, they walked down the hall, ready for whatever came next. Niera knew the road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time, she was no longer afraid. She had found her strength, and with Ethan by her side, she believed there was nothing they couldn't overcome. This part focuses on Niera's determination to push for peace and how her conviction helped shift her father's and the council's views. The beginning of a new path for Zaran and Niera as a leader is set in motion. Let me know if you need any adjustments.